Hello, and welcome to Have Your Say. I'm Anne Minnicozzi, President of the Community Breakfast Collaborative, Undoing Racism Day, here on the main line held at Villanova on September 18th. We're coming right up to that event. And several times in a row now, we've been meeting with representatives from different gun safety, ending gun violence organizations. And so, continuing in that series, today we're meeting with Gale Morrison, co-founder of Radnor Residents for Gun Safety. So thank you so much for coming and being here today. With talking with the various representatives of the different organizations, what I'm really trying to do is give our viewers an idea of what everybody does in their different organization, what things you do similarly and maybe together, and what things you do differently, things that you're working on now. That's kind of an overview of what we'll cover. Mm-hmm. But I know when we were talking before, I just want to remind our viewers that we're having a brief conversation today. Ending gun violence, talking about gun safety is a very complicated topic, and you can have many conversations about it. Mm-hmm. At the community breakfast on September 18th, our main goal really is to provide a space to have conversation about different topics that are difficult to talk about. Mm-hmm. And certainly gun violence, ending gun violence, talking about gun safety, legislation related to that is definitely a difficult topic. So yeah. I'm hoping that our all learning about what you all are doing in your different organizations will be useful to everybody, and especially then as we're leading up to the breakfast. So I want to welcome you and thank you for coming today.
Great, thank you.
I appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm glad we connected.
Yeah, it's great. To start off with, can you tell us about yourself and some of your background, and then how you came to be involved with this issue?
Sure. My name is Gale Morrison. I live right here in town in North Wayne, so a couple blocks from the studio here, and moved to Radnor in 2010 from Allentown, the city of Allentown in the Lehigh Valley.
So you're a Pennsylvanian.
Yeah, so since 2003 I'm a Pennsylvanian, but we have long old ties to the area. My grandmother was from here, my husband's father grew up here. So my children are 18 and 11, so they've been in Radnor schools for 10 years now. My son just graduated from Radnor High School. Mm-hmm. And I became involved in the issue, or engaged in the issue and emotionally after Sandy Hook, of course, like a lot of us, and did what I could with various organizations, and you could continue to watch the news flow and really grieve for the parents and the children, and why is, we're so close to the city of Philadelphia, but we have such a different experience, and you can see it ripping apart communities, and why aren't we doing more about it?
And I think that was one of the things that we were talking about before we started, is that there are so many different conversations that are happening about gun violence and gun safety. Mm-hmm. There's all of these different conversations that are happening, and it's good that they're all happening, but it's definitely a complex issue. And I like Radnor Residents for Gun Safety, at least my understanding of it, is because it's grounded in Radnor Township. Mm-hmm. You can take a specific look and work on the issue specifically in Radnor and connect Radnor residents to it. So how did you end up starting to get connected to Radnor Residents for Gun Safety? How did that happen?
After Parkland 18 months ago, so that was February of 2018, February 14th of 2018. So many moms and dads and people in the community knew of this issue, cared about this issue. At the time of Parkland, there was such an outpouring. Yeah. So we all said, we're doing something, we care, but we've got to do more.
Yeah.
One friend, Lauren Williams, who's now the membership chair for the Philadelphia chapter of Moms Demand Action, she texted me, that night or the next day, we have to mobilize.
Yeah.
And that's really what Radnor Residents for Gun Safety is about, or how it formed. We didn't even have that name at the time, but people were kind of adding friends that cared into emails and into group text, just saying, well, what can we do? How do we do something? Because we're obviously not doing enough. And so what we did, and I think part of my role in the group is pushing for us to just get stakes in the ground. What we should have a postcard writing event, and I said yes, and it's going to be March 9th. So that, and then everybody said, okay, I'll get the snacks and I'll get the pens and I'll get the postcards. And
so kind of putting together like an action plan, like deciding this is something that we can do and getting it scheduled, and then having
pick a date. Thankfully, Father Frank Allen at St. David's Episcopal Church was willing to let us use the community room there for however many hours we needed it, and what do you need to set up? We'll set you up with water and tables and chairs. And so over 100 people showed up for that postcard writing event, and the local Savvy Main Line did nice coverage of it. People were understanding we had to get together. And similarly, the biggest Moms Demand Action chapter in the area after Parkland, normally their meetings would be 25 people who went every month. After Parkland, 300 people went. They had to change the venue 2 times to have enough capacity for everybody.
So there's a lot of response.
Yeah, there's
from
a lot
the community
of
that people want to do something. And I guess the other thing that I'm impressed with also is what you're doing is just about as grassroots as it can possibly get.
Right.
It's people talking to each other, but then also texting and emailing, and then deciding, okay, you're going to do this particular action, like the postcard writing first.
And having those face-to-face conversations is the big one.
And I think that's another thing that's so important. Talking about the community breakfast, being able to have a conversation about a difficult topic. The other thing that's so important is being able to have a conversation, because it's very emotional. You feel like, what can I do? There's like that helpless feeling. So that the fact that you all are organized, there's a forum for people to get together and talk about their concern about this, and then what can they do? Right,
and we each kind of decided, people, if we serve as a sounding board or a place to collate, like we know the Moms Demand Action meetings are here, and who you would contact. There's a group called Orange Wave that's very active in Bucks and Montgomery counties in particular. Some really dedicated people that are politically savvy. So if you want to go canvass with Orange Wave, here's who you talk to about that. Then Ceasefire is the largest umbrella gun violence prevention group in the state, and we wanted to make sure that we were constantly dialoguing with them. And if we've gone in just to do clerical work for them. I have 3 hours and I'll come put stamps on envelopes for you, or we have a lobby day in Harrisburg and we need everybody to show up. So it's event driven, I would say. And at the same time that you have the local perspective, Radnor Residents for Gun Safety, at the same time you also can network volunteers, people who are interested in doing more and learning more and educating themselves. You are also networking them with other organizations, so that's really advantageous as well. One of the things I want to talk about in our conversation is the work that you do in Harrisburg. So you go to Harrisburg periodically? We do, and that's, again, there'll be a lobby day, and that's when a group goes to the Capitol. There may or may not be a press conference, and then they fan out to meet with legislators. So it's tough as a volunteer group to really follow Harris. It's complex. The legislation has, it's a whole nother language. So it's good that we kind of try to have a hive mind about what are the bills that can make a difference, what are their chances of passing, what can we do, who do we call, and even meeting with a legislator takes real effort. It takes hours of dedication that you might need to wait 8 weeks before that legislator even has time on their calendar for you. But showing up is so important. So that's something that each of the members of the group, especially the leadership, understands is important. And because we need gun safety voices in Harrisburg, we need more of them. In the last 18 months, there's been progress. There's been, and right now, if people may know, the teacher, Deb Siamaka, was an AP government teacher at Conestoga High School. She's now running for office. So sending those folks to Harrisburg, sending those folks to Washington is vital. So we support that.
So do you think Radnor Residents for Gun Safety and maybe other organizations, but just talking specifically about Radnor Residents, that one of your roles is really educating the staffers and then also the legislators, because they have to be overwhelmed with the number of issues that they're trying to take action on, but also just learn about and learn how complex it is. And
and they teach us.
The urgency.
They teach us. Well, you have to understand this vote could only happen then. The session has closed. We have so much to learn about the legislative process.
Yeah.
It's complex.
I just started to look online at how you can follow a particular bill, and you can click on there and you can get updates on a particular bill, so then you can see how it's progressing or not, if it's stalled,
right?
Things like that. So that's handy.
It is handy
to look that up for the House and for the Senate.
You can get an email alert every time something has happened. Right now we have the Extreme Risk Protection Order bill. And I'm signed up, and guess what? I haven't gotten any emails because it hasn't moved anywhere,
so that's
sadly.
Stalled.
That's stalled, so you don't hear anything because nothing's happening.
And another thing that we were talking about before we started is the different conversations in different regions. And, there's more gun violence and murders in certain areas rather than others. But even right here in Radnor Township, we do have our own
We've had
instances.
4 murder-suicides in the last 5 years.
And so it's really everywhere. And you were talking about someone, and I do want to talk about the event that you were at on Tuesday, where even in a small town in Pennsylvania, in rural Pennsylvania, you can have...
The rep from Monroe County said, in my small town, 20,000 people, we lost a 19-year-old in the last week or so, I guess. So it affects the large cities and the rural communities differently, but still tragically.
Yep.
So, and our feeling is we need to do more, because the toll of gun violence in Pennsylvania and across the country is just too high.
Yeah.
So we, one of the things we did was host the author Igor Volsky, who wrote a book called Guns Down America. On May 21st, he came. He's on a national book tour. Main Point Books was good enough to host him. I think they've sold out of the signed copies that he signed that morning. But he has a really interesting perspective about breaking the financial ties between gun manufacturers and there's a financial interest in selling more guns and more bullets, right? But if there's political pressure and public pressure to not do business with those companies, that moves the needle. That may help change the conversation. His vision is an America with fewer guns, and guns are harder to get. And not everybody sees it that way, but a lot of us do. Because as we saw the tragedy here in Radnor in March, when a man walked into Wawa at 8:30 at night with an AR-15 and gunned down his ex-wife. So that's horrible. That struck all of us, that such a thing could happen.
Yeah.
And the community conversation, you know, somebody said, well, he just intended to kill his wife, so I'm still not worried about gun violence. Well, a lot of us are. There were 8 other people in the store.
Yeah.
There were 2 high schoolers working in the store. It's not isolated.
There was someone who wrote a letter to the editor to the local newspaper who said, you know, that's our Wawa. That's the one that we go to right after the Little League games because the ball
It's 2
field
blocks
is
away
right
from
there,
the Little League. Mm-hmm.
and it's a kind of a, you know, community center. People go there frequently, and so to have a gun murder happen there,
right.
you know, it's just terrible. I mean, it's wherever it happens. It's terrible, but
right.
there's no community that is immune.
Is immune.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you if you could talk about just on Tuesday,
right.
you were at a policy hearing, and that was coordinated by Representative Movita Johnson-Harrell.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about, like, how many, can you describe the different people who came there, like
Sure,
the different constituencies of people that she was able to mobilize to attend?
I have attended 4 of these policy hearings, and this was by far the best attended, the most informative, the most broad-reaching. I was really, really impressed. It was at a building on the campus of Drexel that Representative Movita Johnson-Harrell organized. As you know, I think she entered office when another person resigned. There was a special election. She won in the spring. Mm-hmm. And she has had an incredible impact. All of us were so thrilled that she was even willing to run and that she won. And she's in Harrisburg, because it changes the conversation. The policy hearing I went to, it was April of 2018, so it was 2 months after Parkland. Her voice wasn't there, literally and figuratively. The legislators, they were the Judiciary Committee. They said this is this is a Pittsburgh and Philadelphia problem. Only a couple of communities care about it. It doesn't have anything to do with us, and we're not going to do anything about it. And I was really dismayed. I was really shocked.
Yeah.
So this one was great. There were probably 25 state reps there from all across the state. People, York, Lackawanna, Monroe counties, Center County, Butler County. I think Butler County was there, but certainly several reps from the city of Pittsburgh had come. People really, they had to keep adding tables because the number of legislators that were sitting on either side of Movita. There was even a long-time ranking member of the GOP majority, name is Mike Jones from York County, and he was willing to show up. So that's a modicum of progress, right? That we had, people were saying this is a bipartisan group finally.
Yeah. I think that part is so important.
It is.
Because bringing people together to have the conversation is a challenge.
Yeah.
And the fact that he would be willing to come and listen and be a part of the conversation, that definitely is a step forward.
And you can tell that it's because of Movita's sort of dynamism, like her ability to bring people together or talk about it. First of all, the bravery of the people she lost her son, her 18-year-old son, but also her first husband and her father. So the willingness of people to retell the story of this raw, emotional, personal grief, it's so that it doesn't happen to other people.
Yeah,
is amazing to me.
Yeah.
But she also has worked. There's a group called the National Network for Safe Communities out of John Jay College in New York, and they have a new style of gun violence intervention program. They call it group violence intervention, and it's a little bit different than the approach people have seen in the past of, I think they've called them violence interrupters, or their community people who can say, I've been in prison, I've shot a gun, let's interrupt the cycle of violence. But these folks do it in a little bit different way, and they they've been able to marshal the resources of law enforcement in a more constructive way, I think. So that was encouraging to me. And they're coming here. They're going to bring that program to Philadelphia. So people, and the police commissioner was there, and the gal who runs the gun violence programming for the city, and Valerie, and I forget her last name. But you heard from all of those people, and then the legislators kind of saying the man who represents Squirrel Hill, where the synagogue shooting was. So there's, as you say, it's such a complex issue. There's so many facets of how we attack the problem.
Yeah.
But a lot of that came out on Tuesday, so it was a really good hearing.
One thing that I am finding encouraging by learning more about this, and maybe you're seeing this too, is the subject of gun violence and gun safety has so broadened, and people are coming at it from so many different angles and trying all different kinds of programs and interventions, as you're saying, that it's starting to resemble other issues. Like I was talking with, interviewing Sarah Wallace from Moms Demand Action for Gun Safety in the previous program.
And she's one of our founders too.
And she gave the example of Mothers Against Drunk Driving and how there was a culture change where people are wearing their seatbelts, you have a designated driver, people are not drinking and driving. It's just not as acceptable anymore. There's much more questions that each of us raises, so we just don't do that in that same way.
It's a change in the culture.
Yeah.
And a change in the thinking.
It took a number of years, but I'm starting to observe, I think, and curious if you're seeing that this conversation is broadening to where people are able to talk about it and then coming at it from different directions.
Yeah.
We're starting to get further in this conversation. And I wanted to ask you also, at the policy hearing at Representative Movita Johnson-Harrell's hearing, or policy hearing, there was the person who said, if you say this word or this word, basically I'm going to shut down this conversation or I'm not going to be a part of that.
That was Representative Jones, because we get to that divide of, there's a fairly decent consensus in Radnor and the main line that it's a problem. We elect people who are gun sense champions, but when you go to the middle of the state, they call it the T, the north and middle of Pennsylvania, it's a very different culture around guns. And so this representative said, if anybody starts to talk about gun control and confiscation of guns, this is over, and you'll get nothing, is what he said to the group. So that's something that's where we are. So we have farther to go.
And that's something that we need to work on, because I was thinking about that. If there are certain words that are used that shut down the conversation for people, what are the words that we can come up with that we can agree on that open the conversation? Like if someone who is on one side and someone's on another side, but what words can we use so we can just say, let's just sit down with each other and listen to each other, even if you have different points of view. I think that might be another thing, a next thing to work on. What words can we use that open the conversation? But I think, like what you were saying with Representative Movita, she had a way of opening the conversation. And surely that event is not going to be the last one. So is she going to have like another policy hearing that's coming up, or is there anything on the horizon that we can let viewers know about? Because I guess we're getting close to the end of our time.
Oh, we are.
Of upcoming events that you know about that people can attend.
That people can attend.
Well, we have the community breakfast on September 18th.
Yeah, the community.
But for Radnor residents.
For Radnor residents, maybe I'll just mention that on August 26th, our police chief is going to be honored by Villanova, and it's tangential but related in the fact that he was willing to have the conversation about locking guns,
Good.
and saving lives. And he said he has been amazing, and he's really, we can't say enough good things about him. And I think he's a model for law enforcement and police chiefs everywhere, because he sat with us, 20 of us sat around, and we all had coffee together, and he just is willing to have those face-to-face conversations. And what he said was, in the beginning, was, I was a first responder before I was a policeman. Mm-hmm. And if you see one of these tragedies, it changes how you think about how we should approach this.
So that's our police chief, Chris Flanagan.
Yes,
is going to be honored. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's wonderful.
I know.
Yeah, so we'll hear more about that when that happens. I know we have your email is radnorrgs@gmail.com. So it's Radnor Residents for Gun Safety at gmail.com.
Exactly.
That
and you
people
email
can contact
that
you.
Can get into our Facebook group where we post events and actions. And lately it's been a little bit of updates that, Gale's going to the hearing, and Lauren's going to be at Gun Sense University presenting from the state of Pennsylvania. That's a national conference that every town for gun safety does. And Lisa will be starting up canvassing again with Orange Wave, for instance, and there's an opportunity to go help ceasefire. So that's the way we've kind of been communicating. And as there are events to support gun sense champions in Harrisburg and the White House, we're sure to publicize those, encourage people to attend.
Good.
And sometimes it's also call Senator Toomey today and tell him you want the background check bill passed.
Yeah.
So that our voices need to be heard. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you so much for being on our program today.
Sure.
I appreciate it, and we're really expanding the horizon of all the different organizations that are involved in really making our communities safer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think
appreciate it.
We're 10 miles from the city limits of Philadelphia, and we can't be, a great state and a great country without cities that are safe. The state of all those communities matters to us too.
And all of our communities here locally in the suburbs and in the rural areas in our unique state of Pennsylvania with all of our different communities.
We have to care about one another.
Yes.
Okay.
Good. All right. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in to Have Your Say, and we'll see you next time.